The Wicked Will Rise by Danielle Page. Chapter 1. The Emerald City was burning. As I zoomed away from the smoking chaos and into the moonlit night, carried in the furry twig-like arms of a monkey, the skyline crackled over my shoulder in a fury of glitter and flames. It looked like a little kid's birthday party gone horribly wrong. The formerly majestic towers and skyscrapers collapsing in on themselves, in confetti bursts of jewel and glass. It could have been beautiful, except for the dense black mushroom cloud of smoke that hovered ominously over the skyline. I was a long-ass way from Kansas. My feelings about that might surprise you. Unlike some people, I had never been particularly eager to get back there. When it comes to cliches, there's one that I'm starting to believe might actually be worth repeating. You can't go home again. Exhibit A. Dorothy. She tried to go home twice, and see how that turned out? Exhibit B. The Wizard. He couldn't even manage to make it home once. Okay, maybe that had something to do with all the fact that he was traveling in a janky old hot air balloon, but still. Then there's me, Amy Gum, trailer trash nobody from Flat Hill, Kansas. While I like to think of myself as about as different as you could get from people like them, it was hard to ignore that we had certain things in common. For one thing, we had all been carried here from the real world by some unknown force, and while I don't think anyone had yet figured out what the force was, I had my own theories about why we were the ones who had been chosen. It's just a theory, remember, nothing proven, or even close. But I sometimes wondered if the things that linked me, Dorothy, and the Wizard were the fact that back where we came from, none of us had ever fit in, whether we knew it or not. Maybe all three of us had been born in a place we didn't belong to, and had been waiting to be found by a home that we could really call our own. Look, I can't speak for anyone except myself. I don't even know the first thing about the Wizard, and only a little more about Dorothy. So maybe I'm wrong. It's just something I've thought about. And here's the thing. Once you've traveled to the dark side of the rainbow, you've reached the end of the line. If you can't make Oz home, you're pretty much out of luck. As far as homes went, Oz wasn't exactly the most hospitable, but at least I could call it mine. And now it was burning. My rescuer was Ollie, the monkey I'd once saved from Dorothy's clutches, flying at our side. His sister Maud was carrying my unlikely companion, Ozma, Oz's mystery princess with mush for brains, whose many secrets were only now starting to become clear to me. Even as we sped into the clouds, the ground blurring below us, I was puzzling about the details of how we were flying at all. We've heard of winged monkeys, right? Well, Maud and Ollie were not exactly those. Or at least they weren't supposed to be. Not anymore. Although they've been born with wings, they had both had them removed. Ollie had cut his own wings off, to free himself from Dorothy's enslavement. As for Maud, I still shuddered when I thought about how she lost hers. I hadn't just seen it happen, I had been the one to do it, sawing them from her back myself using only a dagger. Now this was a new Oz, not the pleasant, magical kingdom you've heard about. That was a long time ago, long before I'd shown up. In Dorothy's Oz, you did what you had to do. You made hard choices. You traded flight for freedom, if you had to, even if it meant losing a part of yourself. Sometimes, in Dorothy's Oz, you had to get your hands a little bloodied. Okay, maybe a lot bloodied. But even in Dorothy's Oz, there was still magic, which meant that what was removed could sometimes be replaced when you had the right spell, which was how the monkeys were now flying with paper wings and were buzzing like dragonflies, vibrating so fast they were just a blur. The wings didn't look like much. They were just two pairs of glued-together newsprint and scraps that barely looked like they should be able to support the weight of Maud and Ollie themselves, much less a 16-year-old girl like me. But here we were, 1,000 feet above the ground and going higher by the second. That was magic for you. Yes, I know it all sounds completely insane. To me, these days, it was just life. It's funny how quickly you adjust to insanity. And if you think that's all insane, try this for size. In the past several hours, I had tried, and failed, to assassinate Dorothy Gale, the crown royal bitch of the magical land of Oz. I'd cut the Tin Woodman open and ripped out his heart with my bare hands. It was still beating with the mechanical tick-tock in the bag I had strapped across the bodice of my torn, bloody servant's costume, where I'd stuffed it for safekeeping. I had done all that. I was still getting used to it, but there was one thing I knew for sure that I hadn't done. I hadn't set the city on fire. But someone sure had, and now, and as I watched the flaming city disappear behind me, I thought I knew who. I suddenly understood that everything I'd been doing back in the palace had made me only a small piece in a much more complicated machine. While I hid in the palace, the Emerald City had been under attack by the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked, the secret cell of terrorist witches from whom I had became a trained operative. While I had been infiltrating the palace ball, disguised as a servant as I tried to kill Dorothy, they had been laying the city to waste. I could only trust that they had their reasons. In a world turned upside down like this, where a sweet little Dorothy Gale was evil, Glinda the Good was eviler, and most everyone else was either scheming or scrambling to stay out of the way, there were crazier things you could do than putting your trust in people who called themselves wicked. Not that I really did trust the Order entirely, but trust was almost beside the point. I was one of them, whether I liked it or not. And while I trusted some of them more than others, I had left all of them back there. Mombi, Glamora, the people who saved me, who had taught me to fight, to be strong. Nox, the person who had forced me to become who I was now. They were still back there in the flames, and I was flying away. It was impossible not to feel like I had failed him. I'd had one job to do, and I messed it up completely. "We can't leave," I said to Ollie for the 5th time since we'd left the ground, my voice hoarse and tired, my legs sore from where he was clutching me tight. I was gripping his fur even tighter. I'm not afraid of a lot, but I've never liked heights. At least it was better going up than down. "We have to go back to the city." I had to say it, even knowing it was no use, that there was no turning around. "I told you," Ollie said in the same weary tone of resigned finality he'd had for the first 4 times. "I can't just let them die," I pleaded. "They're my friends." Once upon a time, how long ago had that even been, Ollie had owed me his life, and there were lots of people upon a times in this place that he and I were even now, I think. "You can't die," Ollie said firmly, "and that's what will happen if we go back there. You'll die, they'll die, Oz will die. This is the only way." "Your friends know how to protect themselves," Maud said. "They'll find us in the north, where it's safer." "North, south, east, and west," Ozma burbled uselessly in a tuneless warble. "No such thing as backward." I sighed, ignoring her. I knew that Ollie and Maud were right, but my last glimpse of Nox back in the city kept flashing through my mind. His dark, always messy hair, his broad shoulders and skinny, sinewy arms, the determined tilt of his jaw, and the look of almost arrogant pride, the anger that was always coiled deep in his chest, finally ready to burst out and strike down everything that stood in his way, all of it to save Oz, the home that he loved. No, not just that, to save me, too. I had learned so much from him. He'd taught me who I was, how I might not ever see him again, and there was nothing I could do about it. "Where are we going?" I asked flatly. Now the burning city was just a tiny orange dot in the vast blackness below us, and then it was gone as if it never existed. "To the north," Ollie grunted. "To the queendom of the wingless ones. Now don't you think you should try to get some rest?" I didn't really blame him for not wanting to talk. It had been a long and confusing night, but I had so many questions that I barely knew where to start. Among the biggest of all those questions was Ozma. She looked perfectly comfortable, cradled in Maud's arms, where she was singing a little song to herself, and the only one who didn't seem bothered by anything that happened tonight. As a gust of cool air hit us and carried us sailing higher in the sky, her hair whipped around her face, and she gave a squeal of delight, like this was just a ride on the tilt-a-whirl at the county fair. Her green eyes were so bright, and it almost seemed like they were lightning our way. Ozma whooped, wriggling happily as Maud struggled to keep hold of her. "Hold still, your highness," Maud grumbled. "I can't go dropping the daughter of Lorraine, can I? Queen Lulu would never let me hear the end of it." Ozma frowned at the name. "I'm the queen," she said with an edge of annoyance. My eyes widened a little in surprise when she said it. Technically, it was true. She was the queen. Technically. But Ozma had never quite been all there, and this was one of the first times I've heard her say anything that actually sounded half lucid. I studied her face, looking for signs of intelligent life, searching for any trace that reminded me of the kind, majestic ruler that I'd heard she'd been before Dorothy Gale of Kansas had worked her magic and wiped her brain. As she blinked back at me, I only saw more puzzles. Who was she? She was the dim-witted queen, who I'd seen back in the palace, wandering the halls like someone's senile great-aunt. Was she the powerful descendant of fairies who had supposedly once been the best ruler Oz has ever had? Or was she really Pete, the emerald-eyed stranger who had been the first person to greet me when I'd crash-landed in Oz, the kind-faced gardener who had risked himself to keep me company when I'd been a captive in Dorothy's dungeon, the mystery boy who, at the wave of the wizard's hand, had transformed before my eyes into the dizzy, bird-brained princess babbling at my side. Pete had been all those people, somehow, and I'd just discovered that he and Ozma were the one and the same. What did it all mean? "Pete?" I asked. I had to believe that he was still in there somewhere, but Ozma simply looked at me sadly. "Come on," I said. "If you can hear me, Pete, talk to me." Ozma furrowed her brow at the name, and for a second I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition flickering behind her eyes. Was that him or in there trying to get out? "Pete," I said again. "It's me, Amy Gum. Remember?"